Thank you very much, Sharon. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm delighted to be with the Bristol University Gambling Research Centre again. And a special thanks to Agnes and Sharon, who've been doing so much work on this. We've come across each other a few times in Parliament at the various gambling reform events. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a new MP. I was elected last year, part of about half of MPs that changed over in 2024. And I think the good thing about this new intake of MPs is we have a real interest in gambling reform. We have a new perspective, and I think we're not burdened by some of the decisions that have been made by previous governments. So there's a group of us, 20 or 30 MPs that are quite active on the Gambling Reform All-Party Group, and we're hoping through the research from people like yourselves we can get some real changes done. But before I worked in Parliament, I ran a mental health charity in Birmingham, and I also served in the military. So through all three of those roles, I've seen some of the damages you get from gambling harm, whether that is young Marines who've thrown their careers away by being involved in crime, or whether it is the families of the bereaved families of members of people that have sadly ended up committing suicide. It affects so many people. I don't think we, maybe this room does, but I don't think we as a country really understand the breadth of gambling harm. In fact, it has been really amplified by technological change, regulatory gaps, and deliberate commercial strategies. And you guys have been leading some of the most rigorous research on this. And of course, I want to recognise the role that evidence is playing in the way that the government makes its decisions. I think one of the real challenges is that the Gambling Act in 2005, that was created and written in a completely different era. We all know that the research has shown that gambling has changed dramatically in the last 20 years with the digital space, the rise of AI-driven personification, and really the opportunity to gamble 24/7 at any time on a device of your choice. And I think the human cost of that is absolutely profound. We have families across the UK quietly and tragically being devastated. And behind each of these statistics are people facing financial ruin, broken relationships, and at the worst end, suicide. And I'm glad that we're going to be talking about advertising and sponsorship through the day today, because I think we're now seeing a complete permutation of sport, television, social media, and online gaming with gambling advertising. And exposure in childhood significantly increases the risk of harm later in life. And so many of these adverts, and I'm glad to see Raffaello is talking about this later on, they're in spaces that children are accessing all the time. How many families go to a football game? How many kids are playing computer games or apps that have access to these gambling adverts? I think that saturation is deliberate. It's deliberate by gambling organisations. It's systematic. And it's a commercial strategy to normalise gambling at an early age. So I think we need to take this issue head on so that children and vulnerable adults do not continue to be exposed to inducements that are designed to embed gambling as normal. And there is evidence that the UK and from abroad that shows that statutory evidence-led interventions such as advertising restrictions and sponsorship bans are effective at reducing harm. I also think financial measures are critical. So I was really pleased to see the statutory levy introduced earlier this year. I'm sure we'll be talking about that later on. That being statutory rather than voluntary is very important, although there's still some way to go to get the details of that, I think, for many organisations that work in this space. I also think it's really important that gambling operators are responsible for paying their fair share of tax. I've spoken on this a few times in recent weeks. The polluter pays principle is really important here. There are different types of gambling, more dangerous, more harmful types, and I think they need to pay their fair share, and I'm hoping that the Chancellor is looking at those options in the budget later this year. It's also vital to understand who is most effective, and the data shows that online gambling marketing disproportionately reaches people in more deprived communities. Again, these patterns are not random. They reflect targeted strategies that exploit social and economic inequalities. And I think if we can frame gambling as a public health issue, it helps us to see harm systematically rather than some sort of individual weakness as portrayed by the gambling operators. And there are precedents here in tobacco, alcohol, and payday lending where evidence does show there's a disproportionate harm that the government can take regulatory action. And again, some suggestions from the Reform All-Party Group would be restricting advertising, imposing levies, funding treatment, and promoting prevention, all measures that are proven to work. And I think it's important, as we're at a research colloquium today, that we acknowledge the role of research in changing the debate on all of these issues. Your work in demonstrating the causal links between marketing, product design, and harm is absolutely vital to policymakers. You're providing the evidence that we need to argue for reform, to move beyond moral concern to data-driven action, and it's evidence that is now giving the opportunity for policy to catch up. So in summary, I'm saying we need a modernised regulatory environment that fits the new digital age in gambling. We need to restrict marketing that normalises gambling for children. We need to fund treatment and prevention through fair taxation. And we need to address the unequal distribution of harm across society caused by gambling. So through our work on the All-Party Group and more broadly, this is a mission to which we are fully committed. And my colleagues and I have started the process of reviewing recent submissions to our inquiry on gambling reform. We're running lots of sessions in Parliament over the coming weeks, and we hope to publish the results of our inquiry early next year. So please do continue to feed into that. I know many of you have done so already. And finally, just to say, public awareness of the evidence base is really important. So please do continue to publish, to speak widely, to go into the media, to continue to work with parliamentarians like myself to get the message across. Because we have a very well-funded and very well-organised lobby that's making the case from the other direction. So these kind of groupings, these kind of sharing research opportunities are so vital. Thank you.
My name is Martin Jones. Some 5 years ago, the Public Accounts Committee produced a scathing report which criticised both DCMS and the Gambling Commission for having a very poor grasp on gambling harm. They said they had got no strategic objectives, they've got no measures of success, and they've got no metrics to measure progress. Apart from a white paper which had 60-odd measures which were tinkering around the edges, I can see no real change, and the most recent Gamble Aware Treatment Survey suggests harm is just as bad, and the most recent gambling survey of Great Britain shows that there are 1.4 million people severely harmed, and probably another 5 million are harmed to a lesser extent. So is it time the Public Accounts Committee revisited their report and hold DCMS and Gambling Commission to account for failure to execute their duty to prevent harm?
It's good to see you again, Martin. Thank you for your question. It's a really good question, and I think it comes to the issue is DCMS the appropriate part of government to manage all of these issues? One of the good things that came out of the statutory levy was moving some of the prevention and treatment out of DCMS into the NHS, which is a step in the right direction, but many people would have been in meetings like this with DCMS officials and ministers and heard the same line that we might have got under the last government about growing the industry to work with the industry to build the type of regulations that are coming forward. I think that approach has not been successful. Harm has not been reduced. There is a Labour Party manifesto commitment to reduce gambling harm. And if we're to do that, we need to go further than just the white paper and the small changes that were introduced in that. That's one of the reasons the All-Party Group is holding this inquiry, to make some suggestions on what the government should be doing. I would be delighted if the Public Accounts Committee also took this up again under their new chair. But yeah, it's something that many of us agree with you on, Martin, and are pushing the government to do.
Thank you, Alex. I think we've got a question from some other questions in the room.
Sorry for making you walk. Hi, Alex. It's Dan from Gamble Aware. I thought it was interesting how many different MPs actually signed the kind of letter to the minister calling for increased tax. I was wondering what got so many MPs on board for something that a lot of MPs haven't taken interest in previously. Is it something about, the tying it to child poverty, or do you think there's other reasons behind that?
Thank you, Dan. Good question. And just for context, the all-party group wrote a letter to the Chancellor asking for gambling taxation to be increased to pay for a reduction in child poverty through scrapping the two-child benefit cap. This was something that was proposed by Gordon Brown over the summer. And I think there's a few reasons why Labour MPs felt so comfortable signing such a letter. The first is, if you speak to any member of the public, they're just really annoyed by gambling adverts. They're annoyed by the number of different spaces they're bombarded in, whether that's the football, that's online, that's the high street. Even local radio, my local radio station seems to predominantly push out gambling adverts over everything else. So there's that annoyance from the public. So MPs always like to do something that's going to be publicly popular. And of course, Labour MPs also care about reducing child poverty. So I think it was quite a nice encapsulation. We'll wait to see what the Chancellor does at the budget. I'm hopeful that there will be some measures around increasing taxes on the more harmful forms of gambling, but that's ultimately up to the Chancellor. We've given the evidence, and we do need to raise some money. So this, I hope, is a way that we can do that.
Oh, and then we've got Ali at the front.
Hi, I'm Rosalind Baker-Frampton from Gordon Moody. So my question is just around the levy funding for treatment providers. So for us and the rest of the NGSN, we've got absolutely no clarity of when money will be available. We haven't had a letter of comfort that we were promised. We haven't had it seems unlikely that it's going to be an adopt, adapt, transform approach, which is what we've originally been told. So my question to you is that this uncertainty means that we're likely going to have to stop receiving people into treatment after the 25th of November, just because we've got an 18-week treatment programme, that's how we will end by March. What can you do, and what can the government do to just give us and the rest of the NGSN some certainty and not have to start issuing redundancies and stopping taking people into treatment?
A really good question. I was very pleased to visit your site in Redditch a couple of months ago. I had the same question then. I think this is a government thing. As a backbench MP, I'm not responsible. But what I can do, and what I'd be very happy to do, is to write to ministers raising this as an issue. I actually met the Public Health Minister a couple of weeks ago, and this was one of the things that was on our agenda. So they do know about it. I think we need to give them a little bit more pressure so we don't have some of the unforeseen consequences that you're talking about there.
I think we've got time for one last question from Ali.
This is going to seem a very naive question, and I'm not in this world. I'm one of the interviewers later on. But why is the lobby so strong? What are they doing that people don't want to stop that lobby being so big and strong? Because what have they got over government? What are they paying for so that they get this access and so that it continues and nothing changes?
I mean, I think they have very well-funded lobbyists, and gambling is very well connected to various sporting events. So they have.
You're in charge. Why can't you? Not you personally.
Thank you. No, it's a very good question. I don't truly understand exactly how all of the lobbying operation works, but they are very well supported and connected. I will also say there are some MPs that have racecourses, headquarters of gambling companies in their constituencies, and they have a completely valid reason to support the industry from that perspective. But I do think we've reached a point now with the new intake of MPs that maybe don't have those historical connections, where we're questioning why are we in a situation where we have real evidence of harm, real evidence for harm in deprived communities, to the kind of people that the Labour Party was built up to protect and support? Why are we still waiting to do nothing around an act that was made in 2005? And I think whatever that lobby is not so effective with the new intake. And I'm hoping as we work together with the all-party group, as more of us move into positions of a ministerial responsibility, there's going to be a real opportunity for us to make changes. And then hopefully the inquiry that we're doing will be quite influential in the direction that they move in.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Alex, for talking to us today and your time taking those questions as well. Really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.